Hey everybody, I hope you're doing awesome today. I hope you've had a wonderful week. Oh, that scared me. Okay, so today we are going to be reviewing all of the skills that we've covered this semester. Okay? We're going to start with author's purpose. That was covered in the first class as part of the story elements presentation. So author's purpose is, let me just turn that off real quick. Okay, so author's purpose is persuade, inform, or entertain. An author can have one of these three purposes. If it's persuade, the author is trying to get you to do or feel a certain way, or convince you to take a certain action. With inform, the author is giving facts, direction, or information. So they're only sharing information without expressing an opinion. And finally, with entertain, the author is telling a story to make you feel a certain way. It's not necessarily going to be funny. It can make you feel all sorts of different things. What matters is that it's not really trying to convince the reader to do anything, and it's not merely trying to share information. It's only trying to tell a story. Exercise number 1, and let me just tell you from now that there are going to be several exercises throughout this video. They're in random places in the video. So what I would need you to do is maybe take out a piece of paper and write down exercise number 1 and then your answer, and don't send it to me until you have all the answers. If you do want to send each of the exercises separately, you can also do that, but just make sure that you answer all of the exercises in the video. Okay, so exercise number 1 is, what kind of author's purpose would a short story be? A short story, would that be writing to persuade, to inform, or to entertain? Okay, so exercise number 1, just write which one of the three author's purpose a short story would be. With that said, let's just jump right into the story elements, also covered on the first day of class. We talked about the main idea, which is basically what the text is about. We talked about theme, which is what the author wants you to learn or know. There can be more than one theme in one story. And then we also talked about the story elements. We talked about character, how these are the individuals that are in the story. There's usually a protagonist and an antagonist. We talked about how characters can be flat or round, depending on the character traits. We talked about characters being static or dynamic, depending on character development, okay? We also talked about setting, which is the time and place where the story is set. We talked about conflict, which is the problem or the issue that is happening in the story, and it can be categorized in one of the 5. Person versus person, which is when two individuals have an issue between each other. Person versus self, which is when an individual has an internal issue that they express through the story. Person versus society, which is one individual fighting against a group or struggling against a group that have similar ideologies. Person versus technology, which can be, for example, iRobot or an issue with internet or with your cell phone. And we have person versus supernatural, which can be an earthquake, a hurricane. We also have other types of conflict. I'm going to try to stick to just these 5, but there's also person versus supernatural, which is, for example, zombies. And then, yeah. So these are the ones that we're going to be that we focused on the last class, and thus these are the ones that we're reviewing. If you remember the test from last semester, which we will take again at some point, remember that there was a pretty long section where you had to read a story and determine the type of conflict. Okay, so try to review that before next week. You have all the videos. If I'm going a little bit fast, remember that this is a review, and all the videos you already have access to on the Remind page and on the YouTube page. Okay. All right, next we have point of view, which is the perspective in which a story is told. So for example, if the story is told in first person with pronouns such as I, me, we, if the story is told in second person point of view with pronouns such as you, or if the story is told in third person point of view with pronouns such as she, he, they, it. Okay, so third person is an outsider looking in and describing the events. Second person is like talking to the reader, and first person is you telling the story yourself. Okay, theme we already talked about. And finally, plot, we have the plot structure. Remember that every story has an introduction, then the plot events will move on to the rising action, reaching the climax, then the falling action, and finally the resolution. Okay, all stories will go through that structure, that pattern. So that's what we discussed last, the first class actually. Okay, so what I want you to do is basically apply that, what we've just talked about, to The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. This is a pretty short story. It's about maybe 2 pages. So what we're going to do is I'm going to send you the story on remind so you can read it, and then you can answer the questions in exercise number 2. Okay? I originally had a video here. If you do want to see the video, it is in the 9th grade review video, but it is a little long. It's about 7 minutes maybe. So for you guys, I can just show you the beginning, but then I would recommend to just read the story.
Richard! Good heavens, what's happened to you?
Keep your voice down. I don't want to disturb Louise. I've received terrible news about Brentley, and I'm concerned about how she'll take it.
What's happened?
We've received word in the newsroom of a railroad disaster. Brentley Mallard was among those killed in the incident.
Oh my goodness. Are you absolutely certain?
I wouldn't come if I wasn't.
However will we tell Louise? With the condition that she's in, the news of her husband's death could stop her heart.
It would probably be best if you told her. A sister's bond can be quite calming, and with her heart in the state it's in...
I suppose you're right. It would be best if you'd wait here. We wouldn't want to overwhelm her.
I thought I heard voices. Richards, what a pleasant surprise. What brings you here this morning?
I'm afraid... well, perhaps it's best if you sit.
Is something wrong?
Louise, this is difficult for me to say.
What is it? Has something happened?
Yes. Something has happened to Brentley.
Brentley?
Yes, there was an accident with the railroad, and Brentley... well, Brentley's not very well at the moment.
Well, what's wrong with him?
He's no longer with us. I'm afraid he's passed.
All right, I'm just going to pause it right there. If you want to know what happens after that, so far we've seen 3 characters. There's actually 5 in the story. If you want to see what happens after that, you're going to have to just read the story. Like I said, it's 2 pages, and I'll send it on remind. Here's exercise number 2. I want you to answer these 4 questions as part of exercise number 2. Number 1, who were the characters in the story that you just read? Like I said, there are 5 characters, so that's a hint. Number 2, what was the setting? Where and when was the story placed? Number 3, what was the conflict? Was it person versus self versus society versus nature versus technology versus supernatural? Which one? Number 4, what was the point of view? Is the story written in first person, second person, or third person? For this one, I'm not really asking you if it's third person, limited or objective or omniscient. I'm only asking if it's first, second, or third. Okay, these sections with the questions I'm going to pass by pretty quickly. So what you can do is just pause the video here while you answer those questions and then move on. All right, so here's an are you there check. If you are, please tell me your favorite holiday. On Remind, my favorite holiday I would have to say is probably Christmas, because all of my family gets together. So I really like that one, but honestly, I love all holidays. I love Halloween, I love Valentine's Day, I love Thanksgiving, I love all of them. So just tell me what your favorite is on Remind, so I know that you're there and that you're understanding everything so far. Here's exercise number 3. It's also about the story. These are reading comprehension questions. Please do not write the whole thing, just the number and the word that you would fill in this blank to answer the question. So here you're going to have a section of the story, then you're going to have the question, then you're going to have the answer, which you have to fill in with a word. Okay, so in your answers that you're going to send to me, just write the number and the word. You're going to do the same for exercises 3 through 7, just the number, please, and the word that would fill in that blank. And do the same for exercises 8 through 11. Just the number and then the word that would fill in the blank to answer the question. And you can use those little paragraphs, those little excerpts from the story to help you answer them. Moving on from author's purpose and story elements, next I want to talk about editing marks. If you may remember this picture, when there is an error that we've identified, there are specific proofreading marks that you can use to identify them and tell the author this is what you need to fix. Okay, so I've put this here. This is also on Remind. You're going to use this if a letter needs to be capitalized, if it's a proper noun. You're going to use this one if it's a common noun, for example, and it cannot be capitalized like students. You use this mark if there is a spelling mistake. Cloudy here should be with a U. You use this one to add a period at the end of the sentence, or maybe at the end of an acronym like Mr. This one to delete a word that maybe it's repeated or doesn't go. This one is to add a word. Here you see the word has been written up here. To add a comma. Remember I told you all these arrows mean adding. So add a word, add a comma, add an apostrophe, add quotation marks. This one is to reverse the order of words or letters. This one is to make a space if these two words do not go together. Or to close the space if the words have been separated and they do go together. And this one for longer pieces of work is to begin a new paragraph. Okay? All right, so you're going to use these editing marks for exercise number 4. Here, I want you to identify the errors in each of these 3 sentences. There are 2 errors in each one. Okay, I'm giving you that hint right now. There are 2 errors in each of these sentences that you have to identify. So make sure that you've identified all 6. All right, all of these sentences are from the story that we just read. I just, made them incorrect. All right, moving on to another topic that we discussed this semester, which was sentences and how complete sentences have 3 elements: a subject, a verb, and a main idea. And then we talked about how there's 3 incorrect type of clauses that don't have that or that have too much of that. So for example, we have run-ons, which have 2 subjects, 2 verbs, and 2 complete ideas that are just together with no punctuation mark dividing them. Okay, so for example, the man is tired, the man did not sleep very well last night. So there, if you didn't have any type of punctuation mark dividing those two, that would be a run-on. If you divided those two sentences with a comma, that would be a comma splice. It would still be incorrect because those are two complete sentences that should be separate. So how do you fix these two types of issues? You divide the two complete sentences using a period, a semicolon, or using a comma with a conjunction. Okay, and then you would change the wording a little bit. Then we have fragments, which means that one of the three elements is missing. That's why we have this deflated balloon over here. This one had blown up because it had too much information. We have this deflated balloon here because it's missing something. So to fix a fragment, you figure out what's missing. If it says, although the man, here it only has a subject, but it doesn't have a main idea and it doesn't have a verb. Okay, so those two elements would be missing. You would have to correct those. Moving on to exercise number 5, I want you to identify in the following clauses if they are run-ons, fragments, or comma splices. After that, I want you to rewrite the clause as a complete sentence. So let's look at those sentences. Again, these are all related to the story. They're not necessarily from the story, but they are related to the background. Okay, so I want you to read each one and then tell me, just write the number, and if it's RO for run-on, FRAG for fragment, or CS for comma splice, and then I want you to fix the error. So once you've identified it, you know how to fix it, so make sure that you do. If it has too many elements, make sure you separate the complete sentences. If it's missing an element, make sure you add it so that it becomes a complete sentence. All right, well, that's all for today. If you have any questions, you know I'm available on Remind from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And also, you have access to all of the previous videos if I was going too fast. All right, so good luck, and let me know when you finish. Send me everything on Remind, okay? Bye.